So now we will invite Raycast to come in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Frank. And I'd love this to be a little bit interactive, if possible. That would be great. Um, Today, we're going to kind of do an update of what I did last year during January, discussing naming rights. We'll talk a little bit about the evolution of naming rights, but also another opportunity that was just approved 2 weeks ago by the NCAA, which is the ability to utilize corporate jersey patches on college uniforms. And still to be determined whether that's going to be one or two patches, but certainly schools are already selling them. Our company, Collegiate Sports Management Group, is very active in valuation, assessment, positioning, packaging, and also selling. And thus far, we've seen activity with LSU, Ohio State, and a lot more to come in the near future. But let's first start just briefly with naming rights, which is where corporations or individuals and potentially other entities purchase the right to naming facilities or locations, events, venues, really the most common example. And you even have a case where University of Phoenix is sponsor of a professional stadium in Phoenix as well. And then this kind of started many years ago with Wrigley Field, over a century ago, actually. And now you see in New York, for example, MetLife Stadium and the Barclays Center, which is the arena where the Brooklyn Nets play. And now you're seeing it in theaters and other cultural venues. And our company's extremely involved in those as well, contributed heavily to the sales of Count Basie Theater in Red Bank, New Jersey, to Hackensack Meridian. You're seeing a lot of financial services companies and health companies, and we're also hearing a great deal about fintech companies digging into this, and AI companies, especially challenger brands to try to gain credibility, which is one of the reasons that naming rights are done. But frankly, jersey patches can achieve quite a bit of the same impact. As time's gone on, Wrigley Field, this was really about just putting Wrigley's name on it. The owner and the gum company at the time, certainly ultimately a candy company, but now it's much more fully integrated. So when a company like Citi embraces Citi Field, and now that's going into the renewal process over the next couple of years, these have to be fully integrated marketing strategies, both B2B, B2C, including hospitality, including advertising, including just branding, including brand messaging, promotion of individual product lines, et cetera. And really, naming rights deals typically run 5 to 20 years. And we will see how the jersey patch market emerges. I'm personally expecting somewhere between 5 years is sort of the sweet spot in that arena. So just some of the benefits for the property, the property or the team, the venue, et cetera, will get the benefit of recurring revenue. They can kind of budget better when you have these long-term, extremely long-term naming rights or moderately long-term deals for jersey patch. It can generate capital funding for modernization, which is absolutely critical. Now, what's great about this is when you do naming rights in advance of these kinds of improvements, you can get benefit from the fan base and the entire business ecosystem of the arena or the team that's being sponsored. And then this just builds great B2B relationships across the board for all parties. From a brand standpoint, it's sustained visibility, it's market differentiation, inclusive of credibility. Works great in highly competitive categories. That's why you'll see a lot of banks doing this. You'll see insurance companies doing this because the long-term lifetime value of customers is extremely high in these kinds of arenas. And then right now, especially in new emerging categories like AI, it's a fantastic tool to just differentiate there are so many emerging AI companies out there. It's quite interesting to see. And then tech companies that are challenger brands for ecosystems, challenging your GEs of the world and your Siemens of the world. Like High Point Solutions jumped in for Rutgers University years ago for their football stadium. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you'll see Jersey Mike's, which is just really supporting their brand of Jersey authenticity by doing the sponsorship for the Rutgers basketball arena. Um, One of the reasons naming rights has really grown is because public funding for venues has been increasingly discouraged. You're seeing a lot less of that. You're seeing more of a need for public-private, or certainly private. And then sponsorship budget's really the one area that is dramatically continuing to increase in brand budgets relative to media. It's very difficult to break through in media with the sheer number of messages proliferating that hit consumers. And so you'll see that is a sponsorship can be a great way to elevate your brand above all others, and to make sure that you're getting the A pod positions in the commercials, and frankly all of the A positions in signage and in every other media vehicle. And because of all this proliferation of brand messaging and bombardment of commercial messages everywhere we go, you're seeing a growing need for high impact brand platforms. Side note, but I would argue that one of the reasons podcasts have taken off is because people are pretty singular in their consumption of podcasts. And so while radio was seen as dying years ago, podcast is certainly a very, very fast growing area. Reason I'm mentioning that is because naming rights or jersey patch supported by podcast is a great way to take your elevated awareness and then bring that across the board to engagement, and ultimately take consumers or business customers down the decision-making funnel. How do you get value and how do you measure value? Well, first of all, if you're the sponsor, what are you generating in terms of direct sales or direct revenue or customer acquisition? What's the media value? What are the media equivalents involved in this? And I think it's important to note that when we look at this, and we look at this from the brand standpoint quite a bit, as well as we look at it from the standpoint of the property, we really do factor in wear out, whether it's wear out of the sixth commercial that you're running in a 2-hour basketball game, or whether it's wear out of having the same logo on the same jersey for 2 hours, which typically viewers will watch for about an hour on television and anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes on a stream. We factor all that in. I think the advantage we have as a company doing this is that we have bought and sold all of the underlying advertising, out-of-home advertising, radio, audio, etc., as well as the overall sponsorships. That kind of gives us a leg up on the sort of the pure analytics companies that do this, because we're also in the marketplace and have been historically as individuals that have come together at CSMG. The hospitality is extremely important. We always emphasize to our salespeople that there's nothing like relationships built on the golf course or during the course of sharing a meal, breaking bread. Still, I'm a little old school, and I think it still works. At least our recent experience has demonstrated that. There's nothing like great hospitality and sharing that with your customers. And then the brand equity transfer. Obviously, if you're a challenger brand or if you're a new brand, then you can associate with an established professional sports team, or in my view, even better, a university sports team, because you're gaining some of the benefit of these universities that have been in business for 100 or 200 years, and the credibility that they have both in their markets nationally and globally. And of course, venues that do host high profile events, whether it's Final Four or the Super Bowl, command higher sponsorship fees. You see that in State Farm Stadium in Arizona and many other places. That was one of the drivers behind MetLife, even though they only hosted the Super Bowl once and might not host it again for quite a while. So naming rights deals, as I indicated before, have changed quite a bit over the years. Essentially, they've transformed, as I've indicated, into comprehensive integrated commercial platforms. And what that means is obviously you're getting the official sponsorship status and you can use the intellectual property. And where it's done properly, you can also use the content. That's something that I always emphasize about our events, whether it's the Collegiate Esports Commissioners Cup, the de facto national championship of college esports. We always emphasize to brands, you get to use this content. So it's not just hitting the 5+ million people that watch our event or the 5+ thousand people that attend. It's the ability to utilize that content to engage your tens of millions of people. Obviously, the ticketing and hospitality, increasingly, you're seeing virtual reality or augmented reality integration in these deals. You're seeing flexibility because technology and media changes so quickly that you really have to be nimble as both the buyer and the seller in terms of making sure that you're maximizing value, which in turn will generate renewals. And then because younger people in particular engage so much on social, it's really important to have a social first fan engagement strategy. These are dynamic ecosystems, they're not static deals. So, what are some successful deals and some characteristics of successful deals? And there are many. We can all think of a bunch of examples, but really the one that I always think of, and in part because I had some great clients down in Philadelphia, in South Jersey, in Central Jersey. Um, I would have to say that the PNC Bank Arts Center just hits me as a terrific sponsorship that has built an enormous amount of equity to the point where we call it the PNC Bank Arts Center. I don't even remember what it was called before that. The great outdoor amphitheater, the top grossing one in the U.S., up to 17,500 guests. It's very consistent with PNC's branding leadership position in their markets. It helps reach diverse demographics because of the range of events that are in place there. So it's something that I just really enjoy. The ties to the local ties to the venue really tie into the community culture. Support of the arts always viewed as very important in the corridor between New York and Philadelphia. Logo visibility, preferred ticketing for their customers, bringing premier entertainment experiences to the regions, all top of mind. Some of the other big ones include Citi Field, Chase Center, TD Garden, where the Citi one is notably done well by Citi in terms of really squeezing every bit of juice out of it, and including customer acquisition, customer retention at all levels, from the smallest consumer banking customer to the largest commercial banking customer.
So Ray, we did receive a comment in the Q&A. It says, just want to note that Ray is right on in regarding the issue of naming rights has been an extraordinarily powerful emotional value for brands.
Well, I appreciate that. It's there are so many brands now, and there are so many ways to consume content. This is really something, along with Jersey Patch, that just ties you into all the emotions that people have and all the excitement they have when they go to a Met game at Citi Field, or a Golden State Warriors game at the Chase Center, or certainly a Celtics game at the TD Garden, which is, again, one that, and you see that financial services companies really have the opportunity to hit people in the entire purchase funnel, the entire decision-making funnel, and then for a broad multitude of the business lines in which they engage. On the other hand, there are a bunch of deals that have been unsuccessful and would be seen as unsuccessful if they happened. But fortunately, some of the teams and venues involved didn't go in a bad direction. So when does backlash really occur? If a venue is named after a corporation that's not reflective of community values, that can be deemed a bit of a problem. Like H&R Block, they're very well regarded in their home market of Kansas City, makes all the sense in the world. That's not a negative backlash. Negative backlash is some examples that you'll see on the next page. If it's short term, it creates instability, and you don't get return on investment if there have been four other naming rights partners in the last 15 years. And really, the main reason isn't the contract length. It's that companies go out of business, they go bankrupt. And again, I'll allude to that shortly. Brand overload, right? If there are too many naming rights deals in a market, it can create confusion. I really haven't seen that happen yet, frankly, but it ultimately could happen, like in a college market like Boston, where there are so many schools. If there are all sorts of different jersey patches and naming rights on every college in Boston, there's definitely going to be a decrease in the effectiveness and the impact of that. But we haven't seen that yet. And then fan loyalty, renaming iconic venues can really alienate fans. So fortunately, you don't see Fenway Park or Wrigley Field or Yankee Stadium changing their names. You kind of have de facto presenting sponsors, and the same can be said for Madison Square Garden, where Chase is the de facto naming rights partner, but again, without causing identity loss or irritating any fans.
We also have another question. How does the team record affect the attractiveness of the site?
Well, that's definitely something to consider, right? If you have to look at a situation like the Jets and Giants, right, at MetLife, and I haven't really seen any brand blowback from MetLife, even though those two teams have not been terribly successful over the past, well, in the Giants' case, half a dozen years. In the case of the Jets, coming up on almost a third of my lifetime, unfortunately, but haven't seen that. That's a great question. Um, and one would think this would be an issue, but it really hasn't been to date. And just here are some examples of things that really haven't worked. The Miami Heat had a 19-year deal with FTX, which ended way prematurely when the exchange filed for bankruptcy. But it's not just crypto. There's a lot of disasters. A good number of them happened in the early 2000s with Enron Field. That goes without saying. Everybody on this team's, I'm sure, is very aware of what took place there. And then PSINet, another company that went south, PSINet Stadium, doing the Baltimore Ravens. And now the new frontier, collegiate jersey patches. So this has really become a tipping point in college athletics, which has clearly become a fully commercialized enterprise. There are players like Xavier Lee, basketball player, not an All-American, just a very good player. 2 million social media followers, 1 million of them in China. University of Florida signed him for $6 million to play his final year of college basketball. That kind of tells the story. And yet I believe they will get good return on investment, all in, when you consider globalizing the school to an important market like China. The catalyst here is $22 million plus annually for athlete revenue sharing, the House versus NCAA settlement, and then the opportunity. Brands aren't sponsors; they're essential partners in maintaining the sustainability of an athletic department. So, one thing I would say is when you look in the mid-major category, where these prices should be in the low, mid, or high mid six-figure arena, the earned media that can be secured with some of these mid-major schools that might have 10, 15, 20, or even 30,000 students, and then multiply that by 10 in terms of the alums, I think those are going to be very underrated opportunities, primarily because of the ability to get other assets around them as well as the media. Sandeep, did you have a question?
Yes, so as Sandeep is asking, how do you ensure there is a brand property fit? Today, many of the naming rights seem very tenuous. It feels like lazy marketing or pandering to the CMO vanity. You may drive awareness, but engagement preference question mark.
I think that's an absolutely terrific question. There is an element of CMO vanity to it. And that's why when we encourage, when we're selling it, And we also encourage, when we're advising brands, don't do it unless you're going to activate it, especially if you're a brand that already has unaided awareness and credibility. Now it's got to be viewed as the tip of the spear in a fully integrated marketing platform. And in fact, engagement and preference can be very much generated. And I will give you an example of that. When Sprint sponsored NASCAR, and they were the naming rights sponsor for NASCAR, did some work with YouGov, and that work demonstrated that they had a 14% market share amongst avid NASCAR fans and a 7% market share amongst casual and non-fans. That's not just engagement and preference, that's actually sales. And I believe if you did that kind of study with Citi, you would see the same thing with Citi and Citi Field. But if there are any follow-up questions about that, that's definitely an area worth expounding on. And that's true for naming rights as well as jersey patches. The interesting thing about jersey patches is it goes beyond the building. It can hit practice facilities, performance centers, and it's mobile. It's really where the athlete is. And these student athletes increasingly are really ambassadors for the entire university. And while that's true in Power Four programs where student athletes might represent anywhere between 2 and 5% of the entire student body, if you look in the Ivy League, if you look at the NESCAC, if you look at other prestigious Division I conferences like the CAA and the Patriot League, you're really going to see some exciting opportunity, because 10 to 25% of the student body falls into that. So these deals really become campus-wide deals. So the NCAA rule is up to 2 commercial jersey patches, 1 on equipment, still to be determined what the characteristics of those are going to be. But certainly the first one is being sold by the schools. In the case of the Big Sky Conference, there's a conference-wide opportunity as well. And why it works is that the patch moves. It's in every high-resolution photo, every social media clip, every broadcast close-up. And the patches offer emotional resonance, even more so than patches in professional sports, for a number of reasons. You're buying into lifelong tribal identity, not just space. And especially while college athletes are kind of jumping from school to some degree, there's still, the affinity is very tight with the college that one went to or the college in a marketplace that's taking a real good position there. Implementation, they should look aesthetic. It's very important that you ideally would like to fit in with the school colors. So if you're, in fact, you have American Express blue, I might veer towards American Express blue kinds of jerseys, whether it's a North Carolina, St. Louis, or anyone else, Indiana State, anyone else with that kind of color scheme. Digital integration, you can use the patch as a QR code to generate exclusive fan content. You can do this literally or sort of theoretically, or NIL activations. Nothing better than using that as a springboard for NIL. Again, activation would be important. And then multi-sport. You want to do all the sports so that you're building a narrative of supporting all student athletes. Now, example where this might not come into play is if you are a lacrosse player and you have a mid-sized business and you can afford mid-5 figures, low 6 figures, or whatever the case may be, you might want to, and you're also a donor, that might make sense to support that one particular sport. But more than anything else, if you pair the jersey patch with a brand ambassador program, that's a 1 + 1 = 3 situation. Yeah, let me just close this up. Why it's kind of important to act now. I think that's actually the end of this. First of all, you see your iconic programs taking a leadership position. I think there's going to be a great opportunity beyond the Power Four in Division I, so that you could support multiple schools, or that you could really dominate a region and buy out an entire conference. Tom Wistrcill's trying to do this at the Big Sky in the northwest part of the country. You become a hero in the eyes of donors and recruits. There is a very high affinity premium here that we expect that research, the type that Dr. Pasakoff does, can really support this. And then you are really being seen as a savior of college athletics right now in terms of bridging this 20 plus $1 million revenue sharing gap that exists. So, with that, I'll conclude unless there are any final questions. And I can always be reached individually with any perspective, questions, or insights. And I'd love to have further conversation about this. But thank you for including me, Frank, Eric, and team.
Thank you, Ray. We very much appreciate your participation today. This is an exciting area. NIL did not go the way that we had anticipated to run, but there's no doubt that these other tools are adding in value. These other opportunities are adding in value.
Well, thank you again. And again, I'm open for any other questions that people want to ask one on one.